Everyone all settled in? All good? Anyway, very quick introduction. I'm Frank O'Brien. I'm with the InfoAge Science History Museum over in Wall. One of the other major hats that I wear is that I do a lot of work for NASA as what's called the Solar System Ambassador. We basically go out, it's a volunteer position, and the idea is we're spreading the NASA gospel. We end up giving several talks a year. This is the third or fourth one I've done this month, and to various community organizations, that sort of thing. So if you have everything from Cub Scouts to seniors, we're there doing them. And we walk amongst you. They look just like us. Very scary having all these space cadets. Anyway, one of the things which I've been passionate about for the last many years, last 25 years I've been doing this, is that at InfoAge we have access, or we ended up getting, an honest-to-God guidance computer that took men to the moon on Apollo. This actually has components from Apollo 14. I made kind of a special interest in it. I don't have it here, actually I'm not supposed to record it, but I wrote a very successful book on how the guidance computer worked, all the way from low-level computer architectures, if you're interested in that sort of thing. That is the toughest chapter. All the way up to how do you land on the moon, down to the switch, down to the checklist and all the rest. I consider this one of the essential skills all men should have. It's like what do you do with the pilot guys? You know, if you're there landing on the moon, the guy in the left seat or the left window sitting there saying, "Oh my God, take over for me. By the time we're done today, we're going to have you all set up and ready to go." So, the whole thing is that this is considered the view from the Apollo guidance computer. This is actually the way the system is working, the issues it has to deal with, all under the covers. The idea of having any kind of computer control is, of course, completely foreign. Automated flight, what a concept. You have to remember, all this was architected in the early 60s. Concept of digital fly-by-wire did not exist until the 80s. And for the very first computer that they used for that, they got a spare Apollo guidance computer to do it for them. So, what we're going to do, we have lots of fun things to talk about. What we're going to be doing is talking about the issues of guidance and navigation. Now I can almost hear the eyes rolling. It turns out it's very simple. In fact, it can be demonstrated using components found not at the flea market, but at Michael's craft store. This is how we're going to learn guidance and navigation. It's actually, again, far simpler than you think. And then by the time we're done, we're going to go through a review of exactly how you're going to take your lunar spacecraft that you found on eBay. I'll be happy to help you with accessorizing it. And we'll talk about how you get it down to the surface. Very tough to do very well, but if you can do half of it, you're doing pretty well. So anyway, here's the issues that when we put together the computer that we had to deal with. First and foremost, this is the Cold War. This is serious Cold War. We could talk about today's politics and the spatterings back and forth between the US and Russia. This was deadly serious. The duck and cover days, for some of the younger folk, you'll probably look at videos and chuckle over it. No, that was serious. That was deadly serious. My dad flew around with nuclear weapons all the time, and we were ground zero if all of a sudden it got to be a shooting war. So we were afraid that the Russians were going to be jamming us. This was not a joke. This was not a trivial concern. Therefore, the computer was supposed to be designed in order to do this autonomously. All that mission control stuff, well, if the bad guys are out there jamming our radio signals, they have to be able to complete the mission all by themselves. That's a pretty tall order. The accuracy. Okay, moon's pretty big and all the rest, but to do this well, you need accuracy down to the fractions of a mile. And yeah, I know it's archaic. We're not going to be using meters here or anything like that. Everything was measured in fractions of a foot a second. And we have to have precision in this computer and in the guidance system down to fractions of miles over 250,000 and down to a fraction of a tenth of a foot a second. That's about that fast. When you're going 25,000 miles an hour, that kind of precision, that's kind of tough, but you got to be able to do it. We mentioned for a second a digital autopilot. They had analog autopilots for a long time. Airliners in the 70s were all analog. Yeah, excuse me, just a bunch of big gyroscopes and a lot of very heavy resistors, transistors, and all the rest. Concept of computer did not exist for guiding aircraft, much less spacecraft. More importantly, we're all very comfortable with hearing the men, the flight suits out there going, oh, I'll never trust my life to a computer and I want to fly it myself. Well, that might have been a little bit true, but the real motivating factor for why they were having a huge push against digital electronics and aircraft, anyone want to guess?
Reliability.
12 hours mean time to failure. You're on an 18-hour mission, you're going to lose it. It just didn't work well. Especially, the military, you can make jokes about it, but they are pretty demanding about what they want. And so the computer also has to do ascent from the Earth, ascent from the Moon, entry, landing, the whole smash. So, we got three main components we have to deal with. Apologies for talking fast. This is kind of a long talk, and I'm trying to compress it down. We started on time. I'd like to leave on time. More importantly, if anyone has any questions, feel free. If it looks like we're running late or running long, we will just have to defer to the end of the chat if you don't mind. So with that kind of a ground rule, one other last question. Can everyone hear me? We have a good-sized crowd. Dynamite. So anyway, all the preliminaries are out of the way. Maybe I'll keep this on track. We have three main components in the spacecraft. You got the computer, okay, fine. But computers are very useless if they don't have anything to talk to, like what they're supposed to be measuring and all the rest. We have what's called an inertial guidance platform. This is what indirectly we're going to be talking a lot of. Yes, with all the stuff from Michael's. It is going to provide all the information we need for which way is up. Where am I going? These are the key questions. But more importantly, it also is acting in a vacuum. How do you know which way the stars are? Well, you need optics, and we're going to be talking about that. Yeah, sextants, telescopes, exactly what we did hundreds of years ago on the oceans. So, real quick for the hardcore geeks, guilty, come on. We're at TCF, excellent, excellent. Computer is a 15-bit. You'll always hear it in literature that it's a 16-bit. How many times? Raise of hands. How many times do you count parity? Okay, that's where you get the 16-bit from. We don't worry about it. Now, 15 bits, but fully multi-programmed, able to run 7 programs at once. 7 programs, this did not exist in 1960 when they first architected it. Multi-programming, what a concept. No secondary storage. Understand, no tape, obviously no disk. You ever see pictures of the disks that they were loading up on an airplane? One of the first IBMs? It's about this big, weighed 3 tons. Isn't gonna cut it. And you can imagine having something spinning like that in space. 2K read-write. We got some very, very, very sharp people here. Now, 36K for your OS, your diagnostics, all of your mission programs to land and get home and all the rest. 36K for that, 2K read-write. Question to the studio audience. How tight's your code? More importantly, we're all very used to, when was the last time, okay, a Malik, all right, C or get main if you're an old mainframe guy like me. It's pretty easy to grab a couple meg. You can grab a gig here and there. Your laptop's not going to complain. And what are you going to do with that gig of memory? I mean, come on. I mean, between you and me, you got a gig. You got enough room on the computer here for 5 variables. And that was it. Zippity-doo-dah. How tight's your code? Think about that. You're writing a program to land on the moon. Actually, some of the moon landing programs were a little more sophisticated, but still. 36K for all of your software. That's 36K words. Sometimes people double it to say it's twice that in bytes, but they really weren't bytes, it wasn't byte addressable. The one horror story. Okay, we talk about having all kinds of limited memory. This is really supposed to be a 4K machine. I don't know if anyone's done any low-level memory management. Okay, yeah, you just like shade your eyes and, your wife just takes you off to the side of your husband. Your kids are being told that daddy has to cry. Yes, memory management's like that. There were 3 levels of memory management because they kept evolving the architecture. Oh, we need a little bit more. Then we need a little bit more. So you had 3 different levels of memory management architecture, very similar to an old machine I used to work on, where we use memory banking, which is, again, strong men have been known to run out of the room, cry, and then take care of a vein in their neck. But the thing that absolutely amazes me, out of all that multitasking, remember 1961 is when all the architecture was laid down. 1961. Well, at the time, I think it was 16K. They were running up to 5 VMs. Oh my God. Virtual machines? Well, that's a little bit of a stretch. That's my term, not NASA's. Actually, it was MIT that did all the work on this. Virtual machines is my term, but it's the best way of explaining it. If you look at a Java P-code machine, what would you call that, a VM? Probably. That's exactly what this was implementing. No multiple address spaces or anything fancy like that. But the improvement in coding efficiency was blinding. We implemented a brand new instruction set. We had a stack. Hardware didn't have a stack. Able to do index variables. This never had it. Et cetera, et cetera. We could go on all day, and in my book I do. But the idea is, you have an extraordinarily efficient little machine now. And if you wonder, real quick, I have a little watch here, a little runner watch. I got 1 button on it. What does this thing do? Can't do it.
Light
Oh,
up.
excuse me. Too much rock and roll and too many years flying without headset. I can't hear what the damn. And so if you can speak up, I don't have to repeat, and I'll be able to hear. So just a small concession there, please.
It lights up when you press the
Nah, it
button.
doesn't even do that. It tells the time. It's a watch. Actually, it does heart rate monitoring. Yeah, we won't worry about that. So it tells me the time. I got one interface, pretty much to set the time. Not a whole lot smarter than this. To say this computer is, oh, it's only as good as my watch, or my microwave, or anything of that ilk, oh, it's only as good as my calculator. What's a microwave do?
Microwave.
Ding! God, we're such a... What's its big I.O. device? The magnetron, the thing that's gonna zap your food, right? This thing, well, in the last minute, it went from 146 to 147. That's information I can use, but that's all it does. This ran 150 devices all over the spacecraft. Everything from the engines, interfaces to the computer, interfaces to the inertial platform, and interfaces to the display console. You can either have them manually driven or automatically from the computer. I kind of bristle when it says it's only as good as this miserable little watch. So, that's what it looks like. At InfoH, all we have is the processor. We do not have the second tray, which contained the memory, alerts, alarms, control stuff, the read-write memory. We only have the processor, and between the two of us, I'd much rather have that. Very quickly, again, oh yeah, we've already talked this, multi-programming, 7 work jobs at once, 5 could be VMs. You didn't have one big monolithic program. You ran it, it scheduled itself for 2 seconds in the future if it had to be a continuous one, and then it finished. We're gonna find out that this is the architecture that saved Apollo 11. We may not have time to go into that. Again, we'll chat it later. So it wasn't like big, heavy-duty transaction systems or anything like that. If you just had to do a guidance calculation, you fired it up, you ran it, you went home with all your updated numbers. Kind of an interesting way of doing it, but this way, you're only running what you need to run, only when you need to do it. So, all right, here we have an interesting little dilemma. The magnificent, heroic job in the last talk, ENIAC. I think by all standards it had a lousy interface. We could sit here and have a panel debate on that, but I think that's fair to say. The ENIAC, okay, punch cards, manual effort needing to sort everything. Although it had evolved a fair amount, this only came 15, 16 years after ENIAC. Again, 1960. We hadn't evolved in our sense of what an interface looks like. Think of it. How do you interface with a computer? Younger folk are all going to say, oh, I have pointers and I have a fancy screen, and of course my phone is just total whiz bang. But it's difficult. All right, some of us in the room are old enough to remember it wasn't. I got my degree with punch cards in the 70s. That was life. This is how you interacted. There were no terminals. There was no live, online anything. You walked into the computer center. I went to Rutgers. You walked into Rutgers Hill Center. You go down the basement. You didn't come out for 2 days until your assignment was done. This is computing. This was our interface. We got punched on cards. We read them through. The same, probably only a couple of years older. Well, it was Rutgers, so it probably was from ENIAC days. It was a state university, and, well, not as funded as well we'd like. But anyway, the important thing was that was our computer interface. Punch cards, slam them through the reader, wait till it comes out, you get a big fanful thing. This was computing. This was the 23rd century. This was Futurama in our mind. But that, you're not going to get a card punch in a spacecraft. Think that disk was big? Think of the printer punch, reader. No, not even a joke. So we have to evolve the concept of what it means to interact. More importantly, we have to have it small and reliable enough to put in a spacecraft to take men from the journey from the Earth to the Moon. So, we have all kinds of little problems. It's got to be efficient. Now, we're all very comfortable with the idea of nice verbose commands because we always know that there's this one person who never gets it and they like that, whatever. Or flashy graphics. Don't even think that there are graphics back in, no, you're lucky to type something in. More importantly, understand these are supremely trained people. Lots of very smart people behind them going to the moon. So, like in all things in aviation, it's okay for it to have lots of cryptic little shorthands. Very good little shorthands. It turns out the interface that was used on the Apollo spacecraft, and the Lunar spacecraft, the LEM as well, is exactly what I'm using here. And I hear a lot of brows furrowing. I hear a lot of eyes rolling. There is a sound to that. More importantly, I will make the argument that the interface used in the spacecraft is no different than what I am. There's Windows, but the Macs are the same. Your phone is identical. There you go. How the heck is that? This is our interface. This is one of the gems of the Apollo program. It's about that big. Most importantly, we'll show some pictures. When I was a pilot, the important thing was the key pieces of information needing to keep the pointy end of the airplane into the wind. If you look up, you should be seeing the sky. Looking down, you should be seeing the ground. So, okay, the instruments that are going to tell me that need to be right in front of me. And there's a standard format. For some reason, my airplane never had the standard format. But it's a standard format. Put the important stuff in front of the pilot that he needs first. Oh, yeah, maybe the radio circuit breakers over there. Radio circuit breakers are going to be fine. You don't need those right in front of you. There's a lot of stuff out of all the instruments, especially when you see all the old aircraft, that you don't need every millisecond, but there's some things you have to. Again, which way is up in the airplane? This was the center of the console. Interface was interesting. That doesn't look like a real intuitive interface, does it? Just 19 keys. Little light. Remember, this is why I love the simulator so much. I mean, when men were men and computers had flashy lights. I mean, that was probably the greatest advancement ever, I think, out of ENIAC. We'll talk these in a second. So warning lights and 3 rows of numbers. Raw data. Here's your thing. The human condition at first glance, for pilots, for just about everyone, is that you can, at a quick glance, absorb 3 things at once before you move on. This is critical in the scan of your instrument panel as you're flying an aircraft or flying to the moon. 3 things. Doesn't matter what, but if I was to show you a picture of something and you had to pick up 3 things of interest in that photograph, you could do it. Trying to get 5 would be tough. So we have 3 lights. It turns out computing like this and space flight, in fact a lot of other things, it's amazing how many things in life are done in 3s. We're going to be talking, yes, with all this silliness, about navigation. It turns out everything's expressed in 3 axes, X, Y, and Z. What is time? Hours, minutes, seconds. So many things, very conveniently, by coincidence or nature, all end up in 3s. So this is a perfect little interface. We'll talk all these keys in a second, but keep an eye on a couple of them. There's 19 keys. You only get 3 to remember. Hint, they're on the left. Look, gone. Here it is in the main spacecraft, the Apollo. Smack down in the middle. For anyone who's done a flight simulator, those are the 8 balls, which way is up. Here you have what's called the entry monitor system. This is the thing that you're watching as you're coming back home. Yes, radios and engine controls and all the rest. But those are the key things, and those are in the center for 2 astronauts to look at. In the lunar module, we have the computer here. There was such a weight constraint in the spacecraft, they threw out the seats. You stood. There were no seats in there. There was no place to sit. Seats weighed in at about 500 pounds. When they're sitting there trying to squeeze out grams, you get rid of the seats real quick. Also turned out that's a very clever thing when it comes to the final part of landing. But, so now you're standing, yes, Velcro on the floor, Velcro on the bottom of your boots, boom, boom, couple cables holding it, you're secured. And right here, right at perfect level, is your computer. You can see that, all right, shameless plug, this is one of the exhibits I put together in Long Island at Cradle of Aviation. Go there, I have 2 of my lemons there. The important thing was Dave Scott on Apollo 15 always remarked at how beautifully that was designed. Because I'm always amazed how people can play an instrument without looking at the keys or the strings or anything. I mean, like I type like this, so you can imagine how I play, piano. Here, after all the years of practice, just like playing a piano, you just type, 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 didn't even look at it. Your fingers knew where they were. Very nicely designed. What the heck am I talking about? I haven't had lunch, maybe I'm hungry, but pizzas. This is the interface to the computer that took men to the moon. Deadly serious. Haven't fooled around yet. Okay. If I was to come to the United States, and I don't know English particularly well, and I'm hungry, and I only know a few words, I can go around, find someone on the street or a cop, and say, eat, eat. Someone's going to figure out that I'm hungry. Okay. Well, it's New York. City of restaurants. What do you want to eat? Pizza. It's a universal staple, especially New York, right? It is. Eat pizza. How is this all related? I've long since forgotten, maybe some people haven't. Basic form of grammar. Eat is a verb. Some action to be taken. A noun, well, you learned that is what the verb operates on, or it's operated on by the verb. So in a fragmentary sentence like eat pizza, I've conveyed some operation that I'm hungry and I want a slice of pizza. Every English teacher on earth will freak out when they see that, but it communicates what you need to do in the most concise way. So, then is it any surprise, come on, is it any surprise that my computer's slow, that the 2 main keys on the disk key are verb and noun. We can all go home now. You've just learned everything you need to know about the computer. Done. Don't even have to read my book. Deadly serious. That's all there is. So if I say I want to do something like, let's display what time the engine fires. There's a verb for that. I can say verb 6, display data. You have lots of options and all the rest, but we'll just say display decimal data. Well, what data? How about the time the engine's gonna fire? You're in a spacecraft, that's probably one of the more important things. And there's a noun for that. So display data of the time the engine's gonna fire. Verb 6, noun 33, it comes up, hours, minutes, seconds. You've just learned everything, done. You can all go home and whatever. But, okay, I know we're rushing through this, but I also know that I'm kind of short on time. We have an inertial measurement unit. This is gyroscopes and accelerometers that are going to help us figure out which way is up. The key thing is, all it's measuring is acceleration and which way is up. Turns out you can integrate acceleration for velocity over time. We all know this. We do know this. And that's how it's presented back to the computer. This is the second key part of the entire guidance system for the computer. Hugely precise. This was probably one of the toughest things to manufacture. If you're thinking of like a 360-something foot rocket to get you to the moon, the parts here were down to like micron tolerances. It was a mechanical device. We don't do this anymore, thank goodness. It was a mechanical device and machined down so that we're talking like sub-arc second kind of resolution of the what we call resolvers and all the rest. It was hugely accurate. And that's what it looked like. This was probably, if you're ever going to talk Cold War stuff, this was probably one of the better secrets of the Cold War, is how well we did guidance systems. I have a great piece of trivia on this. Anyone want to guess? Okay, we know that MIT built this, designed it. Raytheon actually manufactured it, but MIT did all the design work and circuit work. Guidance platform, same company. But government contracting, you say that MIT got, no, they didn't get the contract. There was a far better, far more superior, absolute state-of-the-art company that did guidance systems. And they were the ones that actually contracted to MIT. Anyone want to guess what it was?
Sperry.
Legendary?
Very.
Man, I really wish. Great trivia. Come on, this is supposed to be the funny part.
RCA.
Good guess. Wrong
Singer.
answer.
Norton?
I don't even know if they were still around, but that's a fair question.
Honeywell.
Well, another excellent guess, another wrong answer.
Singer?
Oh, sorry, real quick.
Raytheon?
Well, Raytheon did the actual final manufacturing. No, it was, all right, guys, you're gonna.
Honeywell?
They were legendary. They had the best guidance
Honeywell.
systems around.
RCA.
The AC Delco spark plug division of General Motors. True fact. First contract in Apollo was to GM. Remember, what's good for GM is good for the country. Probably one of the best management structures. And remember, everyone was diversified in aerospace. They took the guidance system route. Did the guidance platform for Polaris, the ballistic missiles, and a couple others. And they were the actual project managers. There's other trivia. We won't go there. Okay, so now we've taken care of this ball, this thing to tell me which way is up. And again, we could spend all day talking of that, and we were short of time. But more importantly, we have to have a reference to the outside. And they actually used a sextant and a telescope, just like you did hundreds of years ago. Even today, Coast Guard still requires you to know how to use a sextant. One of them, standard, very high power telescope, split, however you split this stuff. And of course, only the government can contract for probably a multi-million-dollar single 1X telescope. Same resolution, you can just look outside. But it was actually very, very accurate, and it was slave to the sextant. You navigate in space, which is really this whole thing, finding your way to navigate through to the moon, exactly the way we have done it for years on the oceans. You're going, no, it's a space flight. And I'm going, no, this is navigation. More importantly, if you're not talking about flying to the moon, it's the exact same thing. One key part of it is flying, when I had a little Cessna, or when you take an airline flight to whatever paradise. The software did all the accounting for all this. That's what you expect the computer to do. But you still have to establish your reference. This is a gorgeous, this is actually an older one, but anyone who knows how to use this would feel perfectly at home in the Apollo spacecraft. Here's what it looks like, your optics station. Remember all those verbs and nouns? Yes, they had cheat sheets. They may be they're not that superhuman and all the rest. But anyway, all this gets to our key questions. These are the things we need to know in order to navigate not only from the Earth to the Moon, but from the Earth to anywhere in the solar system. First question, which way is up? Anyone want to guess? Sir,
That way.
I will get back to that. You, man, is looking like, no, God, no, baby, just call on me. Which way is up in space? You want to try?
North Star.
Important reference you made, we'll also get back to
Pick
that.
your
Top of your head.
Yeah, yeah.
This
I,
is new reference.
I was going to plug this in, I had been down, does that mean up, I just went that way?
In space?
Yeah. Okay, well, we have to figure that out. Also, when you're going from the Earth to the Moon, where am I? No, it's not just a phrase I used a lot in college. Yeah, but how do you know that? Must be those computers. And of course, the ultimate question about where the heck am I going? Another question a lot of people in college guilty asked. The final answer on which way is up? Come on, you know this. Sir, real quick.
There is no up.
Yes, there is.
The
Absolutely there is.
The direction to the moon.
Well, the moon's always moving.
It's moving, okay.
Here we go.
Up is changing.
Whoops. Okay, yeah, oh, yeah, all right, this is blah, blah. Which is up? Any way you want. It is. Some guy sees me on the North Pole pointing up, sees a buddy of mine at the South Pole pointing what he calls up. Which way's up? Houston, we got a problem. Which way is up? It turns out any way can be up. The only problem is you have to agree on it. If I want this way to be up and everyone goes, that's good. Done. This way is up. Same thing with this way, that way. It doesn't matter. We have this concept of what we call a reference system or a reference orientation. And there's actually some very, very formal ones with stars and all the rest. As long as we agree on it, this way is up, done. And we have to agree. Where am I? Oh, I'm sorry, no, we're gonna figure out which way's up. This is where Michael's craft store comes in. I have a sextant. I have to establish myself in a frame of reference that everyone's going to agree on somewhere in the solar system. Our case right now would be just between the Earth and the Moon. I have a telescope. I can only look at one star at a time. I will show you all you need to know, 2 stars, and I can be any up I want to be. I was so proud of these things. I mean, I ought to. This is us, and that's a star. We're good, right? Everyone's happy. All right, I'm in a spacecraft. Still haven't figured out which way is up yet. We just stop the spacecraft, and we'll take a sighting right over here. Lock in all the coordinates on the sextant and all the rest, just like you would on a seafaring sextant. And okay, that's cool. So we've taken our first sighting on a star. And we know where these stars are. There's only about 37 of them that you get to choose from. And they're known down to double precision tolerances. Very, very accurate. So you nail that thing with a sextant, you got one. Then we take another star. We're over there, and okay, maybe up this way. Now I've got 2. That's all I need. Because, all right, we do remember this. Come on, geometry. All right, who does it? All right. I'm not going to. We know that if we have a plane like this, all I have to do is automagically, I can define a perpendicular. Well, that's cool. Come on, we remember this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got a perpendicular. Once that's done, I just take the other one, and now I have my two perpendiculars, and now I have defined my location in three-dimensional space, just by referencing the stars. We do a little mathematical twist, just matrix rotation, and up can be any way I want. And we've all agreed on where, because it's all been referenced by stars, which we have agreed. They're a reference system, and we keep track of all of this stuff on the spacecraft computer. If you lose that reference, it's a bad thing. But it's simple arithmetic transformation. This is not even like advanced geometry. This is the easy stuff. So, where am I? Again, I'm just running short of time and I want to make this clear. It turns out we can use that sextant. Now we know which way is up. We can figure out where we are by basic trigonometry. If this is the star I'm looking at, and this is the edge of the Earth, or the center of the Earth, or whatever, all I have to do is start measuring those angles. We know how to do this in like flat geometry. Three space is a little bit more complex, but we know how to do it. It's really straightforward. So, we're done here. The next one is, where the heck am I going? We're just measuring acceleration. When you're coasting in space, there is no acceleration. But there's laws of gravity. This is real simple stuff. And you go, oh my God, no, it's rocket science. No. The key thing is, if I'm going, okay, I live maybe, 15 something miles from here, off of Route 1. I know Route 1 has a nice long straight thing. We all know that the maximum speed of Route 1 is about, 5 miles an hour? So I'm on, this is my commute. 5 miles an hour for an hour, how far do you go? No need to compute, change to kilometers. You're going 5 miles. We know all this stuff. This is just the basic rules of high school stuff. So, this is just like dead reckoning. I know I go 295 for X number of miles and up Route 1 and take a left. Done. We know how to do this. On an aircraft, we do the same thing. This is actually the local area. This is where I used to keep my, where was that? Yeah. Where's Princeton? Yeah, Princeton's right down here. Solberg up about Round Valley. This is the mess that's New York airspace that most pilots will sit there and cry. But I can navigate through this with a neat little computer. This is what we use. Slide rules, yes, circular slide rules. Just like the Sextant, this is a marvelous, perfect device. It's a perfect device. A Sextant really can't be improved on. This is called an E6B. Every pilot learns how to use it, and I can count, if I draw a line, I can calculate time, speed, distance, fuel burn, everything I need with just a little.
What is that called?
It's called an E6B. Nowadays, every kid has it on a calculator. It's basically a circular slide rule with lots of fun indexes on it. And I don't know what happened. One of my talks, someone lifted mine, so I had to lift someone else's. Oh, these are rare and precious, but I have photographic proof. Let me tell you about this. Now, just like the Sextant's been used for hundreds of years. This was designed around a little bit before the Second War. It too has been used for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years in the future. And I have photographic evidence. I can prove this. That may be a tall claim, I'm sure you're thinking. But again, tall claims, extraordinary proof. And yes, here, we have one of my favorites, working on a Z6B, trying to calculate whatever he needed to calculate. So, again, the perfect machine, like the Sextant, I can assure you. Well, anyway, so we now know where we are, where we're going. Again, the equations get a little hairy, lots of fine detail to them, but more importantly, if you plotted it out in 2 dimensions, you understand it. 3 dimensions just mean you need a few more people working on it. And unfortunately, unlike the days of hidden figures and all the rest, this did have to be pretty well heavy-duty calculated on a computer. But anyway, so now you're armed with all this great information. I know it's been quick, and this will go pretty quick as well. Again, one of the essential skills I find, the classic male thing, Is that what do you do if the pilot dies? We've all read how you land an airplane. Well, what happens if you're landing on the moon and that guy dies? This will give you all the basics you need for it. These are key things. Again, impress, the guy across from the bar and all the rest, which is even more important. So we have 3 different phases that we use to land on the moon. We're going about, probably 1,500, 1,800 miles an hour. I forget the exact number. You gotta slow down. You're gonna land, you gotta put on the brakes. But more importantly, the only efficient way you land is to fire your engine in the direction of which you're traveling. So the way the spacecraft is configured, if I want to land vertically, that engine fires one way. If I have to slow down in my direction of travel, I'm looking up, I don't see a thing. But I have to slow down. There isn't that much to see anyway. Now I have to pitch over a little bit just to see where the heck I ended up. Very key thing. It'd be very nice if you knew where you're landing. One time they kind of got lost on the first one. Lots of reasons for that. And then finally, once you find your spot, a lot of the automatic stuff, you're doing a fly-by-wire, not a manual landing, and that's the final phase. So anyway, just real quick, you're slowing down for a bit, you get the computer doing all the calculations, slow down, pitch over, because now, even with your face up, now you're looking at the landing site, you're starting your approach. And then once you get to a certain point, you just say, to heck with this, I'm just gonna go float on down. One of those verbs that I always talk about. We have display data. You can bet there's an update data. There's a bunch of other command. One of them is to change the program that you're running. Or the major one. You have lots of background routines running. Don't need to know that, but you have a major program. And this one is start my moon landing. It's a good one. It's a good program. I'll probably I'll get a license plate with that on it. P63. And you have a verb. Verb 37 is change program to what? Moon landing. Right before the engine fires. Again, it's the same interface we have today. You get the, are you sure? And you go, proceed. Done. That's a button. So you get to ask. Engine fires up, you're on your way down. The computer is fabulous in that it's a wonderfully concise things of all the stuff you really need to know. How fast you're going. Understand, they didn't have room for a decimal point in the code. There's no decimal point here. So you knew that there's an implied decimal there. Time, this is right before you're supposed to be firing your engine. You got 3 seconds. Already, a verb comes up. It's the, are you sure? Verb 99, it's flashing like a theme. And then you hit pro. On your way down. Take good notes. Really, hands up. So, okay, you're on your way down. You're looking up at the stars. You can't see a thing. How am I doing? Is that old Ed Koch line? How am I doing? Who remembers Ed Koch? Yes, good. Anyway, so the computer's regurgitating out numbers. You might have Houston sitting there telling you, oh, everything's fine. Do you believe any of that? More importantly, remember, you're supposed to do this all by yourself. What happens if the radio's out?
Does the lab have windows on all 4 sides?
You're lucky to have windows to see where you're going. Turns out in spacecraft structures, windows are the heaviest thing. Remember how I said, we're going to get to this in a sec, remember how I said the first thing to go were the seats? Well, now you're up there, your tail is here. Actually, it's just up in the periphery vision. Now your face is up against the window. Most importantly, if I'm looking at a window, say the window's over there, I can see a small field of view. If I walk right up to that window, my field of view is immensely better. So getting rid of the seats actually is a twofold thing. Also has a threefold advantage. We're going to get to that. But putting windows everywhere, there's no way more guaranteed to bust your weight budget than putting windows in a spacecraft. Absolutely. Because, they're about that thick. And it's all quartz, or on the command module is all quartz. But anyway, so how am I doing? Most importantly, you've run simulations. You know what the flight profiles and all the rest are supposed to be. You got a cheat sheet. It's about that big. It's Velcroed on the instrument panel. And over here you have, 30 seconds, a minute and a half, 4 minutes. These are all the things on the computer that you should be seeing within a little bit of a reasonable.
What are the calculations that are on there now? Is that-
I'm sorry, so, a little tough.
The calculations that are on there now.
On the cheat sheet?
No, on the
Yes.
interface.
Oh, I just kind of, made them up, okay. it's-
Whatever the time is.
Yeah, here you have 91.4, and your H dot, your vertical velocity is 91. Yeah, and you had lots of, give either way. I mean, it's not, this wasn't so that you'd have to nail it to the .000 precision. So I just took roughly that time-ish. And those are representative. Every mission was a little different. Oops, sorry. So you're following it down. By the way, oops, there's a button. No, I'm not going to go there. Anyway, so it tells you how much fuel there should be left, how high you are, et cetera, what you should be seeing on your panel. Again, quick reference, 4 minutes, 30 seconds, I should be at 54% fuel, boom, 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 you just cross it. Because all you're seeing are the stars, you don't see the moon yet. So anyway, now it's time, you've slowed down enough and they've finally calculated this, you can kind of pitch over and get your first view of the landing site. Couple miles up range, you don't have time. It's very similar to breaking out of the clouds when you're landing in crummy conditions in an airplane. You do have time, you can scoot around, but you gotta be on the ball. You really, really have to. It says, okay, do you wanna really do this? 99. Yeah, proceed. Pitch is over, you get your first view of the landing site. Hugely important. Now the display changes. These are now the things you need to know for that particular phase. And yeah, it's another cheat sheet. So, we're in program 64, all the rest. This tells you how much time you have. Seconds, and a very interesting thing. You got 54 seconds before you're at a point where you have to commit. More importantly, and that's a minute. We'll say it was always under a minute by that point. More importantly, you got the angle you're landing at. Now, I don't know about you, I don't keep a protractor in my, who keeps protractors anymore? Anywhere, nobody does. How fast you're going down and your altitude. So if I'm at 500 feet or 1,000 feet, descending at 30 feet a minute or 30 feet a second, that's a fair thing. And in airplanes, it's very, very, all the instrumentation for your rate of ascent and descent is in feet per minute. So this is a comfortable value for them. Okay, it's per second rather than per minute, but you're used to expressing your vertical velocity that way. And of course, how high you are doesn't hurt to have. The great thing about having those seats and your face up against the window. If you listen to the tapes of the landing, remember you have two guys in there. One guy's driving, and you go, what's the other guy doing? Sitting there peeling a banana, waiting for the You probably know. 99% of that chatter you'll hear is the Lunar module pilot feeding information to the commander. This is true on every airline flight you have. You do not know this. One guy has his eyes outside, flying the aircraft, and only recently airliners got head-up displays. And between a computer rattling off altitude and the pilot not flying, not necessarily the commander, he's feeding him with all of the information he needs to make certain that the landing is successful. One of the things that you'll hear in all the chatter of moon landing is how high we are. Remember, the guy's got his eyes out. There's no sense of depth in how you're going to be landing. Can you tell me if you're 100 feet or 300 feet? No, you can't. How fast am I going down? That's even tougher. Where am I going? That would help. Am I landing, as Neil Armstrong was, landing right for the middle of a boulder field? A really nasty one, certainly would have killed himself. Or that nice smooth spot over there. Well, it turns out one of those numbers that the guys are reading off is angle. We can talk all day about the most advanced aircraft of the day didn't have head-up displays and all those numbers flying on a translucent screen. How do you know what angle you're going down? Because that's your best measure. And it turns out The windows, those big bulky heavy things, actually have two panes. Two separate panes, separated by a little air. And they have this index on here. They're not perfectly lined up, there's all several parallax. The important thing is, if I say I'm landing at an angle of 42 degrees, it's kind of like a glide slope. I line up inside, 42, outside, 42. I now know exactly where I line them up. I just look at the ground, that's where I'm going. No hardware required, batteries not included. You're just lining up lines on the window. You wonder how you're gonna cut back on all that stuff? That's all that extra hardware and fancy stuff. So anyway, last couple of minutes, everyone says, oh, the commander took manual control, this is a lie. You're still flying the computer. The computer flies the spacecraft. There is manual control, but you wouldn't want to land it. The machine was so inherently unstable. If you were to sit there and manually do the throttle and the attitude, I mean, you just wouldn't make it. So again, one guy's focused outside, the other guy's looking at the panel. He might get a chance to look outside. And there you go. Here's all the numbers, how fast you're going down. They also had a fore aft and left right indicator on the panel. Very useful. And I'm on time. And, history will no longer be the same. Blah, 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 blah. Thank you. We're running a touch short of time, but if anyone has any quick questions, I'd love to hear them. Sir?
Did they use one of the conventional astronomical coordinate systems or something else?
Yes. At the time, it was the J 1950, I believe it was. I think it updated until the later 60s, and now Richard used the J 2000.
Why was there perceived the TRO button? Would the answer ever be no?
Oh, you just let the timer go. If it counted down to 0, like that one screen had 3 seconds to go, if you said, oh, it said, hey, not my day, you just let the timer expire and nothing would happen.
So you crash into the moon?
Oh, no. You did, and again, we're running a tad late, but the bottom line is, if absolute worst comes to worst, depending on what phase you are, you had a very important button sitting there right in the middle of the panel.
Abort.
And it said abort. And you press that, look, Ma, no hands, you're going home. Not a bad thing to have, unless you don't want to have it happen, which Apollo 14 is known for.
The last slide there,
Yes, sir.
the last slide picture, I saw that in the Museum of Washington.
Mm-hmm.
You see you've got the inside to that from alone.
It's, believe it or not, if you go to my page on the NASA history site, you actually